A new report that the Mueller investigation is digging deeper into Jared Kushner's contacts with foreign leaders during the transition. According to the Wall Street Journal, the latest instance involves the December 2016 UN resolution that condemned Israel for building settlements in disputed territories. Then President-elect Trump opposed the resolution, posting it to Facebook that it should be vetoed. The resolution was adopted the very next day after the Obama administration refused to block it. People briefed on the matter tell the Wall Street Journal that Israeli officials then began reaching out to senior transition officials, including Kushner. Now Mueller's investigators want to know what role Kushner may have played in any talks. Officials are already looking into the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting that Kushner attended with a Kremlin lawyer, and a December 2016 meeting with the head of a Russian state-owned bank that was sanctioned by the U.S. Then there are the two other meetings he disclosed with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Kushner has also had an issue disclosing foreign contacts on his federal disclosure forms. He's had to update the list 3 separate times, adding more than 100 people who had previously been left off.
So, Peter Baker, let's talk first about the Israeli contacts and meetings. Why would Bob Mueller be investigating that? Would that be illegal if he was reaching out to the Israelis and trying to influence a UN vote?
Well, you know, there is the Logan Act from the 18th century that prevents American citizens who are not in office from trying to undermine and affect the position of their government. It's never been prosecuted successfully, certainly not in modern times, and it's sort of, you know, held out there from time to time when somebody does something that is counter to the administration. It's hard for me to imagine that that's what Bob Mueller is looking into, but it's possible.
That's why I asked. I can't imagine either, because I don't think the Obama administration was really excited about the possibility of Israel being whacked at the UN at the end of the year. I would think it had a lot more to do with maybe perhaps the Russian banking meetings during the transition and some of the other things.
Yeah, we knew at the time, by the way, that there were contacts between Netanyahu's government and the Trump camp during that debate at the UN. That was reported at the time. One thought may be that, you know, he's told the Mueller people, presumably, that his contacts with Kislyak and the other Russians was part of his, you know, his role in the campaign and the transition. He met with other foreign officials. Maybe they're looking to back that up to see whether that checks out. Was, in fact, Jared Kushner, you know, an envoy to all sorts of foreign officials, or was there something unusual about the amount of contact he had with Russians?
You know, Carol Lee, Mueller's also looking at the angle of Jared Kushner playing a role in Comey and the firing of Comey. Yeah. Seems like there's an awful lot of attention focused in recent reports on Jared Kushner, and you just wonder whether other people in the White House are pointing fingers at him, either because he was at the center of all of this or because he has quite a few enemies in the White House.
Well, we certainly know that there's at least one person outside the White House who's pointing fingers at Jared Kushner, and that's Steve Bannon, who continues to do that. Look, Jared Kushner was the point of contact during the transition for any foreign government. You know, he had a ton of meetings and discussions with people representing foreign governments, and so the idea that by this reporting in the Wall Street Journal is that the expansiveness of Mueller's investigation, if he's looking at just meetings that Kushner had with foreign governments, you know, that's a whole other area. And then you have the what you just mentioned, which is the Comey firing, and that's a whole other area. And so I think part of what's happening here is that, you know, there are a bunch of witnesses who are getting interviewed either by the grand jury, by Mueller's investigators, and those folks are talking. And what you're hearing is that Kushner is continuously coming up in these interviews. And so I don't know exactly where, and the Wall Street Journal story doesn't to purport to know where that Mueller is going, specifically with the Israel issue. We know at the time that the Obama administration was furious that the Trump administration was taking these steps and trying to undermine them. So I don't think we know exactly where we're going, but it does have this feeling of, you know, an investigation that's taking on a number of different fronts to try to come up with something, or at least investigate thoroughly the president's son-in-law.
John, you know well from your reporting that Steve Bannon has never had any particular affection for Jared Kushner, views him as a globalist and struggled for the president's ear during the campaign and in his time in the White House. There is speculation that we hear from people that Steve Bannon is out there outside the White House now pulling the strings and maybe dropping some of these stories about Kushner.
Well, there's certainly there's no question that history is not a pleasant history. It's a history with a lot of enmity between the two of them, and there's no question that Steve Bannon is out there through both, I mean, in very kind of obvious ways, through the channel of Breitbart, and then through more subtle ways, is working to try to undermine, still working to try to undermine his rivals and people he seems as undermining what he sees as the Trump agenda. The bigger thing here, it seems to me, though, is that if you think back about how we started this week, not that long ago, just a couple days ago, reading the story in the Washington Post with Ty Cobb, the president's lawyer, still insisting that this investigation is winding down, and that well, maybe I thought it would be over by Thanksgiving, maybe not Thanksgiving now, but by the end of the year, this thing is kind of cruising towards its conclusion. We now, within the span of the last 48 hours, when we see this Kushner reporting and other things, it continues to at least immediately amplify exactly the opposite conclusion, which is that this investigation is not winding down by any means and is in fact growing. I mean, whether you want to say it's justified or not justified, it's growing and metastasizing rather than narrowing. And I can't imagine that the president, hearing this happy talk from Ty Cobb, is not reading these reports in the press and saying, wait, is my lawyer totally out to lunch here? Because this does not seem to be the way this investigation is going.
Sounds like he might be just trying to keep him under control for as long as he can.
Maybe
saying
so.
It's almost over. It's almost over. So, Peter Baker, there's an hour call with Vladimir Putin yesterday, and not so sure that there was a lot of news out of the call. What can you tell us about what happened and what the big takeaway was?
Well, in some ways, this call was really interesting. Remember, of course, they were going to have a sit-down meeting while they were both in Vietnam for that Asian summit. They didn't have it. Instead, they sort of talked on the sidelines. And now it seems to have developed into this phone call on Syria. Vladimir Putin is in the middle of putting together a regional deal involving Turkey, Iran, and Syria that would reshape the region, in effect, while President Trump is sitting back here on the sidelines. It's a really interesting moment when Russia is asserting itself in a region that was once dominated by the United States. President Trump, in effect, signaled that he wants there to be peace in Syria, but he did not say anything on the call, as far as we're told, about whether Bashar al-Assad, the dictatorish president of Syria who has waged war against his own people, should step down, even though that's been the long-standing position of the United States government. His aides say, look, he just wants there to be peace at this point. That's his top priority. He hasn't changed policy, but you can see what Vladimir Putin would get out of that. And what Vladimir Putin, who's met with Bashar al-Assad in the last day or so, has gotten out of that is he's the one calling the shots right now in the Middle East.
All right, Peter Baker and Carol Lee, thank you so much. And Peter, of course, every time you come on, you leave with a departing gift of Rice-A-Roni, the San Francisco treat, and a $15 gift certificate to the nearest Taco Bell.
Yeah, ooh.
Now that there's anything wrong with that.
And Chick-fil-A.
Oh, God. Still ahead on Morning Joe. Kellyanne Conway sent the message, and it wasn't through a microwave, I swear. Although if you open your microwave, you actually might hear her voice. I'm serious. Reports say some Senate Republicans heard it loud and clear. The GOP starting to privately acknowledge that it's better to have a 52-seat majority, even if it includes Roy Moore. That new reporting is still ahead on Morning Joe.